Hello, everyone. I'm here with the Minister of Education, Adriana LaGrange, who just released a major piece of work after 18 months of consultation with parents, teachers, and subject matter experts. She has released the draft kindergarten to grade 6 new Alberta school curriculum. This is something that we committed to do in the last election as a key platform commitment. It was to pause the previous government's curriculum changes, which were quite controversial, and we thought missed the mark in terms of improving educational outcomes on key knowledge and skills. And then to consult much more broadly and transparently with Albertans about what kind of curriculum we should have in the future to set our students up for success. Adriana, I'd like to congratulate you on the 18 months of incredibly tough work. And this is a great, actually that's just a summary. It's 500 pages, right? It is 500 pages. And so you can check out Adriana's news conference on Facebook below. But we're here to take your questions. If you have some, just put them in the comment section. We hope to focus tonight's mainly on issues related to the new draft curriculum and education generally while Adriana's here. But if you do have questions in other areas, I'll try to take those as well. Let me just say, I think, Adriana, it's fair to say the summary here is a curriculum that focuses on key knowledge and skills with 4 key priorities. One is literacy, which is the foundation, the building block of all learning, and numeracy or math proficiency, where unfortunately we've seen big declines in standardized test outcomes lately. Citizenship, which includes what you might call history, geography, civic literacy, cultural literacy, who we are as a society, where we came from, our kind of our civilizational roots, the First Nations, the foundation of the West, Confederation, all of those things. And then
practical skills.
And tell us about the practical skills.
Well, practical skills are what we heard most from parents when we were going across the province, that they want their children to really know applicable skills, things that they can learn that they can take into the real world and utilize in everyday life as well as in the future in their careers.
So a key example of that would be, for the first time ever, a significant part of the curriculum will address financial literacy.
Absolutely. Financial literacy.
And digital literacy or computer science, so that our kids are set to compete in an increasingly digital global economy. Also in areas like, I mean, this touches
coding.
everything up.
There's just so many areas, and I really encourage everyone to go to alberta.ca/curriculum and see the full curriculum. They can have a full look at all of the 500 plus pages, plus summaries on all of these key items that we're just highlighting for you. But there's so much rich knowledge and information in that curriculum. It would take hours for us to go through all of it.
And part of what this curriculum represents is a shift away from the failure of so-called inquiry learning or discovery math, for example, to tried, true and tested teaching methods, a return to not a return, but I say an embrace of basic knowledge and skills. So, for example, in English or language arts, that would be coming back to phonics, which were abandoned in some cases in recent curriculum revisions. Or in the case, I saw some very positive comments from Dr. Davies, Tran Davies,
yes,
about the new math curriculum. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, certainly in the new math curriculum, we're going to go back to standard methods, algorithms, to ensure that students have a really good, solid knowledge of numeracy at the very youngest levels. So we're going to start them early in kindergarten, work our way all the way to grade 6, build that strong foundation so that they are able to focus in later grades on the skill sets they need. They can really build upon what they have as a foundation in the younger years. I heard this weekend from a parent who was really disappointed with the fact that their child right now learns about 17 or 18 different ways to do simple math. And so she was very firm in saying, can we not just show them the easiest, simplest way to learn math so that they can really gain that self-confidence and then really embrace math and go into those STEM fields that we really want our children to embrace and move forward in.
Exactly. So for all of those parents who have had to pay to hire Kumon or after-school tutors for math because the kids weren't keeping up, this curriculum, I think, is a great sign of hope that they're going to get that foundational kind of basis of math proficiency, of numeracy in the school system. So let's go to questions. I see the first one is from Kevin Grimes. How will this K-6 curriculum blend or transition further to 7 to 12 curriculum core values? Adriana?
Well, certainly we are starting with K-6. This is the first time that it has ever been attempted to roll out more than just one subject in one grade level. So we are really looking to ensure that we've built that strong foundation. And as we develop the grade 7 and onwards, we are looking to roll out the 7 to 10 next year as a pilot, and then further the following year. So we are going to build on the strong knowledge and skill sets that they're learning here in K-6, and then develop into those further grades.
Yeah, what I think some people might be a little surprised by is the detail of content here. There's a lot more content because our view is that we should be promoting knowledge, and then kids can apply that knowledge in all sorts of different ways. But these are the building blocks of knowledge, which would then transition into junior high and high school in those later grades. But you start right away with the development of the 7 to 12 curriculum, right?
Absolutely. We are in development right now of 7 to 10, and we will look to pilot it in September of 2022 with full implementation of 7 to 10 in 2023, and also working on the grades 11 and 12.
All right. Kayla Dawn has a good question. Is there anything about racism in there? The answer, Kayla, is yes. In fact, let me just take a step back to say that while there's a lot more historical content here, the goal is to build in young people an appreciation for the sacrifices of those who have gone before us, beginning with the First Nations, but also a sense of pride in the prosperous, free, peaceful, and diverse society that we have built together, while at the same time recognizing historical injustices and shortcomings of our society, including racism. I think parts of the curriculum speak to historical and systemic racism in our past. In particular, we have far more content here than ever in an Alberta school curriculum about, for example, the contribution of Black Canadians, Black Albertans to our society. There's far more Indigenous history and content in all of the different subject areas than ever before, including a recognition of the essentially racist and unjust nature of the residential school system. There is recognition for the first time ever about the contributions of other immigrant communities, including people of Asian, Chinese, and South Asian origin, and the injustices that they had to overcome. So all of those things, I think, are reflected let me just say, it's in a broader context. Some groups, I think, would like our opposition would like to have a kind of single-minded focus on those injustices. The view of this curriculum is that we need to face up to those injustices in our past, including the reality of racism, while also teaching how we have increasingly managed to overcome those things and how we've created this incredibly diverse, pluralistic society. Is that a fair summary?
I would say you summarized it very, very well, Premier, and really to help children to understand each other so that we can, really show them the beauty and the value of every single human being. And so that is something that you will see reflected right through all of K-6.
Lexine, thank you, Minister. Lexine Mack asks, is this curriculum also for homeschool children as well?
So not all homeschools use the Alberta curriculum, but it is certainly for those that are using the Alberta curriculum. So certainly those homeschool children that are using the Alberta curriculum will be learning from this curriculum.
All right. Stacy Sharp asks, who designed the social curriculum? What experience with child development did they have?
So all of the curriculum was designed by many, many people over a decade. When you look into the fact that we started this process over a decade ago, and where we are right now is that there's been many iterations of it, and the draft that you see before you has had many, many hands, many thousands of hours put into it by subject matter experts, by the curriculum working group, which are current teachers, as well as the panel that the advisory panel panel, the curriculum advisory panel, of which many were teachers or superintendents, former superintendents. So a vast array of people, as well as parents, have contributed to this curriculum, and we are so fortunate to have so many invested people that have put so much of their heart into developing this curriculum.
All right. Desiree Daniel has a non-curriculum question. She asks, when are we going to be able to remove the masks from our children in school? So Desiree, I just want to be clear that the Alberta Health and Alberta Education Guideline is only for kids to wear masks in areas where they cannot, where they're not seated or they cannot physically distance. The Alberta Education, Alberta Health is not requiring mask wearing in classrooms where kids are staggered and where they're at their desks. But many, I believe most school boards have brought in their own additional rules that are requiring mask usage, including for K-6. That was not part of our, just correct me.
Grade 4 and upwards.
We said there didn't have to be any masks under grade 4.
Correct.
But some school boards decided to implement a mandatory mask policy all through the school day from K to 12. But schools do not have to require masking of children under grade 4 per the Alberta government guidelines that were based on the advice that we got from our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hinshaw. And so if parents are concerned about the impact that masks may have on health, the learning of younger children, I would encourage you to take that up with your local school board trustees. Fair summary?
Absolutely.
All
fair
right.
summary.
Natasha Kornak. Hi, Natasha. Can you please speak to how consent will be taught in practice for different age groups? Consent will be addressed in the draft K-6 curriculum with a particular emphasis in the physical education and wellness curriculum, the foundational pieces that build up. Oh, sorry. I should say that was just, somebody added a note there. I wanted to say, first of all, Natasha is actually proposed 3 years ago. She was doing an online petition to ask, I think it was the previous government, to introduce consent in sexual relations as an element of the sex ed curriculum, which is a subset of the physical education curriculum. Mm-hmm. And I, at the time, was leader of the opposition and thought that her submission made an awful lot of sense. And so we actually put it on our platform. It's one of the specific things we committed to in the curriculum. So it's included. And I want to say thank you to Natasha. Mm-hmm. This is a great example of a citizen with a passion for an issue making a difference. I know it takes time, Natasha. You were very patient. It took 3 years. Mm-hmm. But congratulations to you and those who worked alongside with you, because today in this curriculum, consent is taught as a central principle in terms of sexual health in the phys ed curriculum. Would you like to add to that?
Absolutely. And so at the earliest grades, we are looking at really having those conversations about boundaries and physical space and personal space. As students get into the higher grades, into grades 5, grade 6, then we are starting to have the conversations about sexual content in terms of ensuring that students are able to understand that forced sexual activity is not okay, and it's never, never right. We had Sheldon Kennedy come on this morning and endorse this curriculum. It's something that he has wanted to see happen across all of Canada, and we are the first province to actually embed consent in the curriculum. So I'm very, very
That's
proud
awesome.
of this.
Well, and that goes back to you, Natasha. Congratulations and thank you. All right, Jill Stankov says, what exactly was wrong with the curriculum developed by the NDP, ATA, and the hundreds of teachers prior to the last election? Again, specific examples, please. I'm happy to take that on, Jill. Because our government was elected with an explicit mandate to pause the previous government's curriculum rewrite. Part of the problem was they were doing it largely in secrecy. They would not release the names of the people involved in the rewrite. They said that they were concerned for their safety. Well, we were as we committed to, very transparent about the experts and the advisors who we engaged. There was no secrecy. It was a wide open process. We consulted much more broadly, including amongst parents, who I find are too often forgotten about, as all of the so-called experts dominate curriculum development, we made a deliberate point of listening to parents. They were included in the curriculum advisory panel. And in terms of the content, I'll just share with you, Jill, I mean, the previous government had made, to its credit, some incremental improvements with respect to math instruction, moving away from the real failure, the demonstrable, empirically proven failure of math instruction in Alberta over the past 10 or 15 years, which started under a previous PC government. Then Minister Adriana's predecessor, I think, issued some ministerial directives that moved away from some of the excessive focus on discovery math or inquiry learning in the math context. But this takes us even another step away from that, focusing on the building blocks of numeracy, like learning algorithms, for example. In the area of another area that the previous government was not focused on was phonics as a critical focus of instruction in English and language arts. But a third area, very important to me, if you look at the K-6 draft social studies curriculum framework that was released about 3 years ago, actually zero reference to Canadian history. The words Canada and Alberta did not actually appear. Zero reference to our actual history, the development of institutions around which our society is organized. Parliamentary democracy, zero mention. Confederation, zero mention. The settlement of the West, no mention of that. Canadian military history, absolutely whitewashed out of the previous draft K-6 curriculum. 120,000 Canadian war dead who weren't even mentioned. I always said that was the greatest scandal of the previous government. And yet it was just an endless recitation of what in Australia academics call black armband history. There's no shortage of injustices in Canadian history, injustices which we must acknowledge and which we must teach within context, and that's the point. There are some who would like to teach that Canada is basically a completely unjust or even legitimate settler state, and that our entire history is one of injustice and genocide. I think that is a terribly distorted, ahistorical view of this amazing country we've built. This is a balanced social studies curriculum, which for the first time incorporates things like Black Alberta history, like Indigenous residential schools, like far more Indigenous history than has ever been included in every subject. But at the same time, it actually seeks to teach young people about the civilizational roots of our society, from both Western and Eastern civilizations, about the great poets and literature, monuments, and ideas that have shaped our society over time, about, yes, the development of, about the First Nations, about the settlement of the West, about the development of our political institutions, the values like the rule of law that underlie them, and hopefully to develop a sense of gratitude for those who have gone before us, a sense of pride in the society that they have built, and a recognition of areas where we have fallen short. A far more balanced context for teaching social studies, in my view.
I would agree. I don't think I could add anything more than to say that we did have active teachers from the curriculum working group who joined us in the fall to really refine and look at the input that we received from so many across the province, so many experts, and they themselves, the knowledge that they're bringing from the classroom. And so all of that has gone into the curriculum. We have teachers as well as experts, as well as regular Albertans who have contributed to what is in that curriculum. And you said it very well, Premier.
All right. Bobby Rowe says, grade 2s to learn about Genghis Khan. Why? Well, as I just mentioned, Bobby, the part of the building blocks of knowledge in social studies is about world history and the civilizations which preceded our society, including some of the major figures, some of the major developments, some of the major symbols. And this can be taught in an entirely age-appropriate way. I mean, I remember I was reading, children's stories about great historical figures when I was in grades 2 and 3. I think it's entirely possible to teach interesting, engaging, basic, age-appropriate content. So later on, when kids get to high school and they're studying history with greater depth, they have that basic platform of knowledge, those building blocks of knowledge. So they know that there was a great Mongolian empire. They know there was a Roman empire. They know there was a Mayan empire. They know some of the characteristics of these historical civilizations and where they kind of fit into the scheme of things. I think we're ambitious for children to have more knowledge and not less.
Mm-hmm. And I would say absolutely, and that will lead to fruitful conversations that they can have with each other and with adults to really spurn that engagement, that excitement to learn. And I think this is something that you will see happen as a result of this.
And that kind of world history was a building block of history studies in elementary schools in the past. We lost that increasingly with the focus on inquiry learning, and now this is a drive back towards knowledge and content. We know it's going to take some adjustment, but this is, I would point to the research done by many academics in this area, including, of course, E.D. Hirsch, about cultural and civic literacy, the building blocks of being a good citizen. Nancy Riskin says, how have the territories decided no longer to follow our curriculum? Adriana?
Well, that's not true. In fact, I spoke to my colleague, R.J. Simpson, Minister of Education for the Northwest Territories, and he indicated to me, because there was a story floating around, that they were looking to end their contract with us. In fact, every 5 years, they go through a review process, and that's what they're doing right now, reviewing their curriculum. And he says there is nothing imminent from their perspective. That being said, he is very excited to hear what we are including in our curriculum. I was able to share some of the details around our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit content, the fact that we are comprehensively looking at residential schools, the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, the treaties, that they're living documents, and how we've included First Nations, Métis, Inuit content all the way from kindergarten to grade 6. He was so excited to hear about that, and I'm looking forward to sharing the curriculum with him.
Excellent, thank you. Jen Hum asks, how are we to teach coding without the proper technology in the classroom? So just some context, the practical skills, including digital literacy and computer science, which might include some kind of introductory coding material, that's part of the curriculum. And would you like to comment on the technology question?
Yes, and Dr. Adams was another person that was at the press conference this morning, and she indicated that it's not necessarily necessary to have all of the technology in place. Some of the key principles about coding are things that can be done with paper and pen. So while it's great to have the technology if you have it, and we certainly are looking to increase technology across all of the province, if it's not available, we can certainly continue to provide the students with that skill set without having actual technology available.
All right, Tammy Andrews asks, why didn't the ATA help design the new curriculum? ATA is the Alberta Teachers Association. First, let me just say that teachers were involved in this curriculum development and will be going forward, particularly as it is piloted in the schools, in some schools who step forward and would like to test drive the draft curriculum next year, and so the ATA will be involved in that. But obviously, no one interest group or union should have a monopoly on something that is of interest to the broader society, and that's why we committed in the last election to a open and transparent consultation process that would not be dominated by any one or two particular organizations. But would you like to comment further on that, Adriana?
Absolutely, and as you indicated, Premier, in the on our website, alberta.ca/curriculum, you can find all of the process that we went through, all of the names of the individuals, all of the teachers that were involved in that process. As we move further into the validation part of the process, teachers will be implementing it in the curriculum, or implementing the curriculum in the classroom, and we will get that rich knowledge of how they're going to implement it, how they're, if there's any adjustments that need to be made. We will continue to see that roll out, and so teachers are critical. And I really want to give a shout out to the teachers because they have had an incredibly hard year this year with the pandemic, and they have done an incredible job. They deserve our gratitude and our praise, and I really just want to thank them for this this wonderful year that they've had, given all of the challenges.
Absolutely.
So, and I'm sure you want to as well,
Absolutely.
Premier.
My dad was a teacher, and he made a lot of sacrifices, but never had to go through a year like this. So thank you to all of the teachers for their flexibility and endurance through this difficult year. Warren Schneider asks, when are we having a referendum on separation? Okay, that's definitely not in the curriculum. That's not a curriculum, but that's fine. We're willing to entertain some non-curriculum questions here for sure. Warren, this government is committed to fighting for a fair deal for Alberta. There will be a referendum on equalization this fall, and there may be other referendum questions about getting a mandate to fight for a stronger Alberta in the Canadian Federation. But that this government was elected on a commitment to focus on jobs, the economy, and pipelines, not on separation. In fact, our party was created on a commitment to a strong Alberta in a united Canada. And Warren, I truly believe that if we were to go down the rabbit hole of a hugely divisive, emotional debate over separating, over leaving Canada, it would massively damage our economy, our efforts to bring growth and investment back to the province. There's one thing that we're not going to get jobs back here until we get investment back here, and we're not going to get investment back to Alberta if we launch ourselves into a period of enormous uncertainty, political, legal, and economic uncertainty. I'm not sure how old you are, Warren, but I'm old enough, barely, to remember what happened in Quebec after they elected a separatist government. Pardon me. Back in 1976, and immediately there was a giant sucking sound, to quote Ross Perot, of money, jobs, and people that moved from Quebec to Ontario, Alberta, and the rest of the country. Our real estate values are just starting to recover. I mean, I saw my home real estate, my Calgary property tax valuation at the beginning of the year. My home has gone down by about almost a third in value since I bought it in the beginning of 2015. That would be a walk in the park compared to what would happen if we decide to tear ourselves apart with the discussion of leaving the country. And so, no, Warren, we are not going to jeopardize jobs, the economy, and the pipelines. Because guess who owns the coastal pipeline? Trans Mountain? The Government of Canada. And the only argument we have for coastal access, for our energy, which is existential for our future, is being within Canada. No, we're not going to, because I understand that there's 15 or 20% of Albertans who are really angry and want to leave the country. We're not going to allow that anger to disrupt the future of our economy. Let's fight for a fair deal, but let's keep our eye on the ball of economic growth, which requires investor confidence, which requires political stability, not the instability that a referendum like that would hold. All right, Garth Hewitt says, can we fire activist teachers who refuse to follow the curriculum and pursue their ideological agendas? That's a hot potato. Adriana, over to you.
Thanks for that, Premier. Really, I know the vast majority of teachers, as I said earlier, are caring, wonderful people who really want their children to learn. We know that this is a solid curriculum and that there is so much rich content as well as the ability for children to really thrive. So I anticipate that the vast majority of teachers will, in fact, embrace the curriculum, but it is part of their job to teach the curriculum and teach to the curriculum. So certainly we will look to see that, as we pilot the program, that teachers will be stepping up to ensure that students actually have this wonderful curriculum implemented in the classroom.
But that's a question. I want to take his question seriously, as you do.
No, I do.
Because we hear that kind of question often from parents, and so I know that part of our platform was to implement the recommendations of the panel on teaching excellence, and I also know that you've been looking at ways of improving the regulation of the profession to ensure that sanctions are possible when there's grossly unprofessional conduct. Would you like to comment on those areas?
It is certainly something we're looking at, strengthening the teaching profession. That being said, school boards are the ones that hold the contracts with the teachers, and we oversee the overall implementation of what we find is the competency portions. We do have the teacher quality competencies now, the teacher quality standards that teachers have to follow. And part of the standards is being competent teachers and ensuring that the students actually get the knowledge and skill sets that they require to be successful. At the end of the day, that is the job of the teacher. The curriculum is what the teachers need to teach to and teach to the students. How they do it is in the purview of the teacher's professionalism, and we will hold teachers accountable for that professionalism. So I don't want to diminish the question that was asked, but I know that the vast majority of teachers really do want their children to succeed, their students to succeed. So we will certainly take seriously if anyone does not want to ensure that they're doing their job appropriately.
Thanks, Adriana. All right, Pearl Vartstra has a good question. Sorry if you already answered this, but will kids that have already suffered severe literacy delays from COVID restrictions get help? Thanks for the Facebook session. And the answer is yes. Have you made the announcement about this yet?
We did the announcement about the younger students, the K-3, with Dr. George Giorgio and his assessment on literacy that we are certainly providing to all schools across the province. On the older children, we're still in the stage of really exploring what that learning loss looks like.
So why don't you tell us about what we're doing with the elementary kids to help them?
With the elementary students, Dr. Giorgio has accessed and worked with his colleagues from around the world and has been able to bring in a program where it really looks at assessing the learning loss. In his initial research with several school boards that he's been involved with in the province, he's seeing that reading and comprehension loss is in around that 35%, which is quite high. Particularly in our K-3 group. So he is looking at helping teachers to assess that loss and then developing strategies to address it while we are still dealing with the pandemic so that there isn't a significant loss as we go into next September.
Thank you. So next question goes to Garth Hewitt. We need school choice where funding follows the student. Is this being discussed? Well, Garth, not only is it being discussed, it's policy in Alberta. It's certainly the policy of this government. In fact, one of our very first pieces of legislation that Adriana brought through Alberta's legislature after the last election was the School Choice Act, which strengthens our legal protections for school choice. And largely, the money does follow the child in Alberta. As you know, independent schools receive 75% of the per pupil grant that goes to public boards. And charter schools receive 100% funding. The School Choice Act actually expands or reduces government red tape that has limited those charter schools. So now we've lifted the cap on the number of charter schools and relaxed the criteria for them to be approved. Of course, we also have alternative schools within the public system. This is one of the greatest parts of the Klein-era reforms is that not only did they provide charter schools and ensure support for independence, but they also encouraged the public and Catholic and Francophone boards to innovate within their own publicly funded schools for alternative programs that resemble often the kinds of programs that independents or charters would develop. Plus, we have the most generous rules in Canada for homeschoolers. So I think it's fair to say that the dollars do follow the child in the Alberta system, and that is one of our strengths. It's one of the reasons that Alberta used to lead the world in standardized test score outcomes in areas like math proficiency and literacy. I believe it's because of excellence was driven by the competition that was created by school choice in this province that has only been strengthened. And would you like to complement that?
You've said it very well. I would just say that the Choice in Education Act really reinforced that parents are the primary educators of their children, and they have the right to choose the type of education they wanted for their children. And so we see that highlighted in all the numerous choices. As you said, there's public, there's separate, there's francophone, there is the charter schools, independence, homeschooling, and that's never been more important than right now through the pandemic, because it has given parents options to really choose that type of education that is meeting their child's needs through the pandemic. And we saw a large number of students go to online learning throughout the pandemic, and so it was important that we have that strong choice and that it's quality choice in all aspects.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, Cam McCormick asks, why are residential schools not actually talked about in the proposed curriculum and instead offered through the lens of America? Well, Cam, the premise of your question is not accurate. I'm sure you heard that from somewhere. But if you go and look up the grade 5 social studies curriculum that is online, you will see that actually the subject of residential schools is introduced, how they developed in Canada. There's also content about the conclusions of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on residential schools. Now, generally, the curriculum does not dictate particular resources, teaching resources. Those will be filled in over time. But it does indicate in this respect at least one resource, which is to encourage students to listen to a recording of former Treaty 6 Grand Chief Wilton Littlechild talking about his own personal experience. Grand Chief Littlechild, who, by the way, was the first Indigenous member of the Canadian Parliament representing Central Alberta, he has strongly endorsed the curriculum, in particular the content within it on the Canadian residential school experience. So, Mr. McCormick, it is there. Just take a closer look and you'll see that.
Absolutely, it is there. And when you look at the full K-6 curriculum, you will see that Indigenous content and that rich cultural history, as well as all of the other elements that we spoke of earlier, is embedded throughout the whole K-6.
All right, even Paula Wick says, keep religion out of public schools unless it's all religions, not just Christianity. Well, even, first of all, religion is part of our society. It's part of the lives of many, if not most, Albertans, and it's certainly a part of our history. It's not possible to understand our society or our history. The values of our laws were based in part on Mosaic law, for example. All of these things develop together in our history, and so it's essential that students are presented with an objective view of the role of religion in the development of culture, of our particular Canadian society. And by the way, when you say keep it, I mean, in fact, the right for confessional religious schools is written into the Canadian Constitution. So even I think you're kind of repeating a bit of an American concept here. And in fact, in terms of this social studies curriculum, it introduces the roots, initially the roots of the great three monotheistic phase that have been a central part of world history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and then goes on to provide content as well about other great world religions such as Buddhism, Sikhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. So there is, I think, balanced content about the role of of religions in the development of world and Canadian history. All right, Ilan Lamontagne says, did you hand select the questions brought forward? No, Ilan, if I did, we wouldn't be asking that one. And I think most of the questions we've brought forward are actually skeptical or critical of the government. Hopefully that's a proof point that we try to get a broad cross-section of questions as best we can. Rick Kozak says, what about teaching children about banks, RRSPs, savings plans, how to open an account, how to save money, the tools needed in real life? Thank you, Rick. Bang on. That's why we committed in our election platform to including for the first time ever financial literacy as one of the key practical skills included in the curriculum, and that has very much been reflected in the draft curriculum today, with all of those subjects that you have mentioned being enumerated. And what grade do they start introducing that financial literacy content?
Kindergarten.
Okay.
We are starting at kindergarten with the basics, learning about money and counting money, et cetera, and moving into earning, saving, budgeting, and borrowing, just all of those key elements. I'm a mother of 7 children. It's the one thing that I've heard from my own children, as well as the numerous students that I interact with on a regular basis, that they would really like these practical skills, and the sooner that we can get them into the schools, the better.
Awesome. All right, Kim Hula Etu says, I hope I got that right. What supports and resources will be provided for teachers to implement the final curriculum?
Right. So, now that we've been able to make the curriculum public, we will now work with school divisions and school teachers to determine who is interested in piloting the program. We have allocated $6 million out of my budget, my department budget, to ensure that we properly resource as well as provide professional development for the teachers and those schools that are looking to pilot the program. And of course, in subsequent years, in 2022, when we go to full development, then we will expand that even further.
Eric Dreger has an interesting question, non-curriculum related. Will you allow graduates to actually have a graduation ceremony and prom? So, Eric, high school ceremonies usually latter part of June?
Typically into May and sometimes into June.
I think it's going to depend on the timing, Eric. I think so. We just had a discussion at the Emergency Management Committee of Cabinet today, and we are hopeful that we'll be able to, based on the progress of the vaccination program, we hope that in the month of June, we will have essentially administered first doses of the COVID-19 vaccines to all adults over the age of 18 in Alberta who want to be inoculated. And that will certainly give us a strong level of initial protection. And that's why we are optimistic that we will be able to go ahead with outdoor events this late spring and into the summer within certain parameters. So please just stay tuned. We know that high schools need those parameters and a definitive answer to that question. The public health branch of our Department of Health is working on that and the whole question, all the broader questions about summer events. Let me just say this though. I think it'll be much easier to accommodate those events if they're done outdoors because of much lower risks of transmission for outdoor events. So that would just be my planning tip right now. You have something more to add?
I'll just add that ultimately it's school divisions that will actually determine, so school boards will determine what moves forward in terms of a graduation and what that graduation ceremony looks like. I know they are very keen to ensure that graduations, which is such a critical part of the educational journey, is celebrated. So school divisions are trying their best and being very, very creative as they were last year, but ultimately it does fall to school divisions to determine how they are going to move forward.
So public health will work with them, and we'll try to figure this out, because we certainly
yeah.
want grade 12s to benefit from the rite of passage of their high school matriculation. All right, Colleen Marie says, why does physical education seem to be more about research and health and less about activity? Good question.
Well, and I would say that from our perspective, the curriculum has embedded activity. We really want students to be active because we know that being active really enhances a person's outlook as well as just their overall well-being. We also know that it affects mental health and wellness, and so that is very, very important to us. And so there is embedded in the curriculum a very high percentage of working out and being active physically as a student.
All right, Lisa Hannay says, no mention of LGBTQ2I+ in the curriculum. Is this accurate? Do these kids and staff see themselves in the curriculum? Well, I can say to Lisa that one of the foundational principles of the whole education system, based on the ministerial order signed by Minister LaGrange last year, and reflected in the key guiding principles for the curriculum, is human dignity and the equality of all people before the law. And that applies to everyone, of course, regardless of their sexual orientation or sexual identity. I would further add that in grade 3, students will learn about the diversity of family structures, including that some families may have 2 moms, for example, and so there will be that introduced in grade 3. Anything to add to that?
Just very much what you said, really looking to ensure that the dignity of all throughout all of the curriculum, all K-6, very strong anti-bullying, anti-discriminatory language throughout all of the curriculum, really ensuring that every student sees themselves reflected in the curriculum, and that was very key to much of what we heard from students themselves, that they wanted to see themselves and their families reflected in the curriculum, and you've already given an example, so thank you.
Ivan Strega has a very important question. Who's your pick? Flames, Oilers, or Canucks? I'm going to go to you on that, Adriana.
You know what? Probably best to just...
Come on. All you Red Deer people root for the Oilers, right?
Well, we're kind of halfway in between, and it divides our family, so I'm going to leave it alone at the moment.
And I see that the Oilers and Leafs are tied 2-2 right now, and Calgary's playing Winnipeg at 8 o'clock on tonight as well, so we'll see what happens there. All right, thanks, Ivan. Jair DL, I hope I pronounced that correct, says, when can we start recalling MLAs? Well, the recall law was introduced to the legislature 2 weeks ago, and it will probably pass in March, April. And what am I saying? It's already March. It'll probably pass in April. And then the regulations have to be drafted, and it will come into effect later this year, probably late summer. So stay tuned. But if you want to learn more about the recall law, you can look it up. It was introduced by Minister Madhu about 2 weeks back. All right, Grace Healy says, why are kids learning about U.S. history in Canada? Well, Grace, I would just say that the United States is obviously a hugely important part of the world. We're trying to teach not just myopic, parochial, narrow Alberta and Canadian history. We are part of a broader world. We're part of a broader continent. We're part of broader civilizational streams, which obviously very much includes all of North America and the United States. And so I don't think it's peculiar at all that we should include some basic facts about American history, which is in many ways inseparable from Canadian history. I mean, the very foundation of Canada, British North America, all of that is back and forth with the United States. The reason why the Northwest Mounted Police were sent out here on the Great March West was partly to respond to the incursion into southern Alberta, southern Northwest Territories of American whiskey traders who were exploiting the Indigenous people. Just to give you one example, you can't teach Canadian history or Canadian Indigenous history, for example, without talking about things like that. The Sioux people who came here as refugees from American militarism in the 1870s, who came here, many of whom whose descendants who still live here. You can't teach the United Empire Loyalists, including some of my ancestors who founded really much of English Canada, and particularly Upper Canada. The black slaves under the Underground Railway who came to Canada and founded many of the first black communities in Canada. You can't teach them without teaching about the reality of American slavery. So it's just an integral part of teaching our broader history, and I guess that would answer the question. All right, Seth Bourque says, hi, Premier and Minister. How does this new curriculum ensure a prosperous Alberta? Well, Seth, good question. I would say this, that in the last 10 years or so, last several years, we have seen a significant decline in numeracy and math proficiency amongst Alberta students in particular. We used to be at the top of the world, and now we most recently we're ranking at about 17th, I think. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you see countries with which we will have to compete in the future, like South Korea, China, seeing their math scores continue to climb. That, for me, sent a very disturbing signal about the ability of future Alberta workers to compete in an increasingly digital and globalized economy. We need to equip young Albertans with those basic skills of, for example, numeracy and then digital skills to be able to compete in a digital global economy. That's critically important, and that is a key motive factor behind today's curriculum reforms. The same applies, of course, to literacy. We've seen some decline, not nearly as dramatic as we did in the numeracy, but we've seen a meaningful decline in literacy as measured by standardized test scores on the international level. So we need to turn that around. And then finally, practical skills like computer science and financial literacy, as I mentioned, all of those hugely important for our ability to compete, to be prosperous, to prepare young people for the jobs of the future. And I know that, Adriana, when you get to the high school curriculum, there will also be a stronger emphasis on practical learning, on experiential learning, on things like co-op learning, apprenticeships, trades, not just traditional industrial trades, which are important, but trades in areas like coding, for example. So there will be more of an effort to offer programs that prepare young people for the jobs of the future.
Absolutely. And I just want to give a shout out to Seth. He's one of my ministerial Ministers Youth Advisory Council. You might remember when we, yes.
Yeah, good to hear from you, Seth.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much for that great question, Seth.
Colleen Molendick-Pipka says, I hope I got that right, Colleen, I'm sorry. Will the kids be in class learning, or are you preparing for another school shutdown after Easter? Colleen, we fully expect the schools to continue for in-classroom instruction as they have been since August, with the exception of the 1-week extension on the Christmas holidays. And I would just remind you that most Canadian school kids have not been able to go to their schools for in-classroom instruction throughout the past year. Ontario and Quebec, the vast majority of those provinces have been shut for in-classroom instruction. We made this our top priority within the context of the public health measures designed to save lives and protect our healthcare system, and that will continue to be a priority. Now, I have to say this, Colleen, we've learned enough after a year of COVID never to say never. We can't predict entirely what the future may hold in terms of out of control exponential growth and viral spread driven by the more contagious and lethal variants such as the B117 variant here, or more troublingly, more worrisome is the P1 variant out of Brazil, which is far more lethal and which may be piercing the protective effect of prior natural infection and indeed vaccines. So these are, if you will, unknowns that we all have to deal with as they come. But based on where we're at now, we are confident about our ability to maintain the continued safe operation of schools for in-classroom instruction. All right, Crystal Crawford says, do you have any plan for kids' sports, such as lacrosse or hockey or ball? These kids all go to school together. Why can they not play their full sports? So there has been a relaxation of public health restrictions around sports and other physical activity at schools, primarily for practice and those kinds of exercises. But I have to say that we have seen some worrisome signs of growing viral transmission among school-aged children in Alberta, and Dr. Hinshaw believes that is likely linked to the recent relaxation of extracurricular activities such as sports. It clearly was not happening through in-classroom instruction, which is very structured, but apparently has been accelerated by some of those athletic activities. Look, folks, we are getting to the end of this thing, by which I mean the pandemic. We just need to avoid exponential growth driven by these variants by by taking further steps forward that could accelerate viral transmission. We just need to keep this thing under control for a few more weeks until we've got enough vaccines to have a real protective effect on our population. So on points like that, let's all have patience as we get through this. Add anything to that?
No, I don't have anything to add, Premier.
All right, why don't you go with this question? I need a water break.
Okay. So, Jason, when are we going to see more vaccines in the arms? 13,500 today is unacceptable when we have at least 100,000 in stock. We need to figure out how to get significant more daily numbers.
Thanks, Peter. I'm not sure where you get that we have 100,000 in stock. My direction to Alberta Health is to be inoculating effectively based on the incoming inventory. And effectively they have been doing that. I mean, the last I checked, this maybe last night, we were well over 90% of the doses in our inventory that had been administered. There's always going to be a certain, obviously, and this week, by the way, this week may be an aberration because I think we're projected to receive over 300,000 doses, which would be about 3 times more than we've received in any week up till now. So some weeks you're going to get kind of a lumpy surge in doses, but my instructions again to Alberta Health is not to sit on those as much as possible, to administer them as quickly as possible. And I do know that we have the capacity. We really believe, with the involvement of our pharmacies, to do up to 400,000 a week. We've been hitting record numbers. The problem is not the capacity to deliver the vaccines. The problem is the scarcity of supply, which comes back to the federal government's mismanagement of the procurement of the vaccines. So we are, if they were to send us, a million doses over to tomorrow, I guarantee you we would have those administered within about 2.5 weeks. So we have that capacity, we just need the doses.
And Premier, if I could add, I was born in 1961, so I qualified to get the AstraZeneca about a week or so ago, and it was very, very easy. I went online, just like all Albertans do, and I was able to book an appointment and get in right away and have my vaccine administered. So please, when your opportunity comes, when you are called forward to have that ability to have yourself vaccinated, as leaders, I think we need to show that it is safe and effective, and that this will help us get to that other end of the tunnel where we will all benefit from looser restrictions.
Let me pick up on that, Adriana, because I know you were unfairly attacked by some of the, I'll just call them what they are, they're hate mongers on Twitter. These are people who just sit there amplifying anger 24/7. And they were accusing you of jumping the queue or something. Well, in fact, you qualified for that vaccine at that time based on your age, which is the same for every Albertan at your age category, your year of birth.
Correct.
And if you had not gone forward and taken the vaccine, I think that would be a bad message as a elected leader. You were saying that
I would agree.
You believe the vaccine program is important. You're leading by example. I think you did exactly the right thing.
Well, thank you. And I believe I did the right thing as well. I'm just hopeful that those people really thought I looked much younger than my actual age. So that's my hope. Good
for you. All right, Lawrence Headley says, what are you doing to stop the leftist ideology that's been creeping into the curriculums across North America? Lawrence? That's what we're doing right there. That is a response to the previous government. I talked about their draft K-6 social studies curriculum. Highly, highly politicized, ideologically driven. This is real content, an objective, knowledge-focused curriculum that is a compelling response to those trends. Warren Cronin says, can parents opt out of religious studies?
Yes, it's embedded in the Education Act that a parent can opt their child out of religious studies as well as explicit sexual content as well.
Yeah. And, all right, what have we got, another question here? Are we running out of questions? I find that hard to believe. Andrew Ashley says, how will your curriculum support, and just so you're wondering, because some people are skeptical about how we do this, we've got a couple of folks here are surveying the questions that come in, and their marching orders are to pick a representative sample of those questions, and then they just format them and put them on a screen so we can read them, because we couldn't read all of the things as they flow past us on the usual Facebook screen. Andrew Ashley says, how will your curriculum support diverse students like those with autism for their academic success? Adriana?
We have obviously students that have special needs. The curriculum is modified for those students. School boards certainly have, through the specialized learning supports funding that they receive, the ability to ensure that they are able to adjust the curriculum accordingly so that every student has access to success. We certainly want every student to reach their full potential, even those that have special needs. So of course there are a variety of adaptations that school divisions will put in place.
All right, Craig Peterson asks, is there a French as a second language curriculum? Well, Craig, I do know there is a French language curriculum. It's basically this curriculum translated into French with some variations. But I don't think there's a separate one for French as a second language. I think it's up to those schools or teachers to adapt content if perhaps their students are not, if French is not their mother tongue.
Correct, and as well as the French immersion program that we have as well.
Great. All right, Echo Miller says, how will the feedback be dealt with, and will it be used to make changes to this new curriculum, and how?
Yes, so thank you so much. We are hoping that every Albertan has the opportunity to look at the curriculum. Again, alberta.ca/curriculum. Please go on the website, view the whole curriculum, and provide us your feedback. We will take that feedback. My department will look at what that feedback is and then further distill it and see if we can make adjustments to the current curriculum before it gets into the classroom. And certainly we're going to take that feedback from people right across Alberta on our website, as well as teachers who are going to actually implement the curriculum. And we will look to refine the curriculum so that by September of 2022, we will have a finalized version of the curriculum, and it will be the best version possible.
Awesome. All right, Carol Crouch has another non-curriculum question. What happens to the vaccines at an AHS facility if people do not show up for the vaccine? Who gets that Pfizer vaccine? So Carol, because these vaccines, once they're transported, they have a pretty short shelf life, and so generally, I think what AHS tries to do is to ensure that there's a reserve list of people that can come in and be inoculated if there are any doses left over at the end of the day. I'm pleased to tell you that our wastage on doses since we began the vaccine program in December is I think it's like 0.2%. So our folks have been doing a great job out there at extracting typically 6 doses from the Pfizer vials, and doing things like having reserve lists to ensure that those do not go to waste. All right, Stacy Connolly says, where are current affairs reflected in the curriculum? Why the emphasis on the past? Well, Stacy, I would first of all say that you can't really fully understand the current until you understand the past, and that is the whole point of history education. And let me just go a little further on this. You know, one of Canada's greatest modern historians, Professor Jack Granatstein, wrote a seminal book about a decade ago called Who Killed Canadian History?, in which he critiqued, I think, the scandalous abandonment of basic history instruction, particularly Canadian history, and it was replaced with all kinds of political fads and a focus on social histories and what the Australians call black armband history, as opposed to the actual core historical facts about who we are and where we came from. And so the concept here is to develop in students a basic understanding of world history, the key civilizations that have influenced all of our institutions and ways of life, then how that developed here in North America with the indigenous people, with First Nations, European contact, and the whole story, the settlement of the West, Confederation, all of that. So great. This is K-6. It takes us up to about the turn of the century, about 1900. So it deals with Confederation, and I think it probably ends around the time of Alberta, 1905. And then the modern or 20th century history will be addressed in subsequent grades, 7 through 12, and that would get us up to today's world. And so I fully expect that, and obviously, Adriana, through various different subjects, teachers will introduce contemporary issues to grapple with them. One example would be the introduction, I think in grade 5, of the report and recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which deals with the historical injustices of dealing with First Nations in Canada, but also contemporary challenges and the need for reconciliation. So there is, it's an effort to build basic historical and cultural knowledge. You can't read a complex poem or a novel unless you first started with your ABCs. And I think the same applies to interpreting contemporary or current events. You can't really understand them fully, how our political system operates, different political values, etc., legal systems, geography, complexity of modern economies and trade systems, unless you've started with the foundations. I think in grade 2, somebody was critical of this. It talks about the Silk Road and trading patterns in the early world. Well, that's to begin getting young people to understand the central importance of trade in every economy, in every civilization, in every society, so that when they come to look at trade and economic issues in our society, they have some reference point. Is that a fair way of summarizing?
I would say so, and I would just add that teachers always have the ability to adapt their lesson plan, pardon me, I'm losing my voice, to incorporate current events. That is just something they do on a regular basis, so this does not change that.
All right, Jensen Evtus says, how do you feel about the elders not endorsing the curriculum? Well, in fact, first of all, there's was a group of Indigenous elders who were consulted, that Indigenous elders who participated in the curriculum advisory panel. The curriculum has been endorsed by former Grand Chief Willie Littlechild, one of the most respected Indigenous elders in Canada, as well as Chief Billy Joe Laboucan, and many others. And you can see the list of Indigenous spokespeople who have endorsed this curriculum. Oh, not everybody is going to endorse it. There's always going to be some variance of opinion. And let me be blunt, I'm sure there are some people out there who would like this curriculum to be overwhelmingly about Indigenous content, but this is about balance. And here's the key thing, there's more Indigenous content in every grade here than there has ever been in an Alberta curriculum. But this is that is quite rightly set within a context. And is that a fair, would you like to add anything to that, Adriana?
Just that I have the quotes from both Chief Billy Laboucan and Grand Chief Littlechild. And, from Chief Billy, he says, I have reviewed the draft K-6 curriculum and I'm supportive and glad to see the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit content. I would like to thank Alberta Education and our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit elders for delivering the draft curriculum. It is our shared knowledge, and elders are the source for our understanding of history and the respect thereof. And as you said, Grand Chief Wilton Littlechild, and I quote him, as a former member of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, Alberta, during our hearings, was the first province to publicly declare it was launching its own initiative to develop mandatory curriculum on the treaties and residential schools for all students. We believe that education in general is the key to reconciliation, and with the work done to date, it is consistent with the United Nations Declaration in the promotion of the respectful relationships between citizens. And as a chief, I am honored to be a validator to the new education curriculum and look forward to its positive and transforming change, unquote. And I, along with Chief Littlechild, look forward to that as well, because it will certainly, given the amount of content that we have all the way from kindergarten to grade 6, will enhance the ability for for our students to learn about each other and really respect each other. It's not just about Indigenous students learning their past, it's about all students learning the past.
Well, thank you so much, Minister. A great note to end on. Thank you all for your good questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of them. We did take 35 questions and went 10 minutes over. So this is the beginning, I should say, today, of a chance to review and comment on the draft curriculum. And as the minister has said, as Adriana has mentioned, education will be taking note of input that comes back from teachers, parents, and others over the year to come before this is finalized into a curriculum for the school year starting in August, September of 2022. So Adriana, once again, thank you to you and your team for your tireless efforts. Thanks to everybody who had a role in putting this together. I'm very excited about this and what it represents as part of our broader efforts to ensure a strong and prosperous Alberta in the future. Thanks all. Take care.
Thank you.